When I bring somebody into my team here at Fastlane, we do a weekly team meeting. And if there's a new person, a new director on a brand on the team, have everybody introduce themselves. And then I'll always ask each person share a piece of advice that they've been given over the course of their life that just stuck with them, and was really meaningful to them. And I'm always so amazed at what I hear and what you hear from people in general when you ask them that question, because it can be very telling in a lot of different ways and also inspiring. For me, when people ask me that question, and I think this is so important for everything that you're doing and we're doing, and for people who are investing in franchises and taking that leap, I say to my whole team all the time, nobody is you, and that is your superpower. And I think that that is so important, because there's always going to be things to learn. There's always going to be fears. There's, like you were saying, but man, if you can stay authentic to who you are.
Yo, this is the Streetwise podcast, where we help you level up your game, level up your leadership, and level up your life. I'm your host, Matthew McReynolds. I'm a multi-brand franchisee, and I'm a franchise consultant, which means I help people find, launch, and build their ideal franchise business. My main goal is to help you get off of zero and become the person that your dreams need you to be. Buckle up, get your popcorn ready, let's go.
Years for this opportunity.
I've been waiting for this for a long time. We're finally doing it. Streetwise Nation. Streetwise Nation. We got Jessica McLean. It sounds very Irish when I say, is that the proper way to say your last name, McLean?
I've always loved you, and I love you for asking me that question, because very few, I'm Canadian. So yes. In Canada, it's a really common, popular last name. It's pronounced McLean. So think of it like McLane. But in America, the vast majority of people that I work with here at Fastlane and just in general, they pronounce it usually McLean. So I get that all the time. I've kind of just stopped correcting people. But the ones who really know me, they know it's McLean,
Well, it has been said here. Nobody has an excuse anymore, because we know how many people listen to the Streetwise podcast in franchising. It is Jessica McLean. For the record, we've said it here. I'm just happy to have you on. Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
To be here. And if anybody says it incorrectly again, now I'll call them out and say, hey, you haven't watched the Streetwise podcast. What's going on?
You're not listening to the show. You missed a gem of an episode.
You want answers? This is where you gotta go.
This is where you gotta be. All right. So tell the people who aren't as familiar with you as I am what your role is, and how does that impact your day to day?
Yeah, sure. So look, I've worked in the franchising space and world for the really vast majority of my career. So pretty much straight out of university, started working in franchise operations and training with a small franchise brand based here where I'm from, which is Ontario, Canada. Today, and as of 2 years, actually yesterday, 2 years yesterday, I am the vice president of franchise development, vice president of franchise development at Franchise Fastlane. So I've got a team of 5 franchise brands and concepts that I'm responsible for the overarching franchise development of. But I've worked in franchising now for about 12 years.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so let's break down real quick what Franchise Fastlane is to the new listener. It's an FSO, franchise sales organization. What does that mean? To somebody who might not be familiar?
It's so funny you say that. I can remember when I was at one of my first conferences for the brand that I was with, which was an independent brand before coming into Franchise Fastlane. Sure. And I remember I started to see these groups at these conferences, and I'm like, what's going on with this? Usually
I resonate with that.
1 or 2 development people, what's happening? And so I started to see it more and more because of the emergence of these franchise sales, franchise development organizations, which now, in my opinion, in a lot of ways are dominating the franchise development space. So what we are is we're a platform that brands, franchise concepts, can apply to be a part of, and we specialize specifically in franchise sales and franchise development. And so that's our area of expertise. And so what that allows franchise brands and concepts to do, especially emerging franchise brands and concepts, is to focus on the infrastructure support side of their business. So, in other words, ensuring that their franchisees are successful while we handle finding them hopefully right and quality franchise partners to invest in their brands. And that's what we exist to do. And like I said, that's our area of expertise.
Now, before you guys pick up a brand, do they have to hit a certain stage of growth within their business themselves? I was just right before we hopped on this call, I was just talking to a gentleman who recently converted his business into a franchise. He has the FTD. He used a service that helped him convert over. He has 0 franchisees. He's working on his system. God bless him. I know that one day he will have a great franchise system, but I cannot imagine what would happen. Yeah, he's building this thing. I just can't imagine what would happen if he was a part of an organization like Fastlane that was throwing candidates his way, that the candidates might be qualified, but the business itself might not be able to support that level of franchise candidate coming in. So what do you guys look for when you're adding a brand, and maybe educate me and the listener on that piece?
Yeah, so we have a pretty significant vetting process when it comes to brands and brand applications. And what I always tell candidates when I meet them, candidates that are evaluating a franchise brand that's on my team, is in a lot of ways, when we're selecting the brands that we partner with and bring into our Fastlane portfolio, we're going through our brand recruitment vetting team is going through a lot of the same steps and similar steps that these candidates and clients of yours are when they're evaluating brands. So to your point, we're looking at what's the founding story, right? When was it founded? What's the brand history? Who are the founders? What does the infrastructure look like? What do the unit economics look like? Are there any franchise locations? And if not, and there are only corporate locations, how many are there? Is it 1? Is it 6? Is it 20? How long have they been around? How have they performed? So all of these different things, we have what we call internally here a necessity list and then a nicety list when we're evaluating and vetting brands. And so our team that's conducting this vetting, they're checking off these boxes, which also includes if there are pre-existing franchisees, which in most cases, we really try to make sure that there are at least a few. And so they'll talk to them and they'll validate in the same way that somebody coming through the discovery process would. And so there's a lot of different things that we look at, but some of the most important things are, is there a robust franchise disclosure document? And item 19, that's important to us. Founding story and history is really important to us. Is there some kind of, and I'm not a huge fan of this word, but I'm going to use it, some kind of unique differentiator affiliated with the brand, something that makes it different, what gives the brand an edge, because a lot of people that invest in franchises, they're looking for that too. So that's just a few, but it's a thorough process. And because we have so many brands today, because we've evolved in the way that we have as a platform that do seek to become a part of our portfolio, we've also now created additional options for franchise brands. So internally, it's called Carpool. And this is an option for a brand that just isn't quite there yet as it relates to the overarching kind of grand Fastlane portfolio, but they're close. And so we offer support as it relates to sharing our process, weekly training calls. They still use their own internal developer, but we now have different subsets that we offer because of the volume of brands that do apply to come into the portfolio.
So interesting. Do you find that certain founders get stuck at a certain spot? I mean, the way that I articulate it usually is when you have a business and you decide to franchise it, you essentially get broken up into 3 different, basically your business gets divided into 3, and now you have 3 babies, 3 businesses instead of just one, where your core business, then the franchise development piece, and then the franchisee support and ongoing operations. Is there one of those areas that you find that, or I guess franchisees, you see they get stuck in one area versus the next when they come to you?
What do you mean, franchisors that are applying to come into our portfolio? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Just on your, in context of you and your experience, I really am thinking about new emerging franchise businesses in general, but based on the ones that you see coming to the fast lane and are now trying to get into the carpool.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, I would say this. Probably what, in my experience, most franchisors, new franchisors, emerging franchisors don't necessarily understand and therefore can struggle with is just how robust your systems and your support and your technology and your onboarding and your ramp programs need to be,
Got
so
it.
that you are doing everything that you can to make sure that these franchise partners coming in are successful. And also to make sure, because to me, we hear this all the time. It's like, if you find a quality franchise brand, you got to take the playbook, right, that they give you. And this is one of the biggest values of a franchise brand, and execute it, right? Do what they
Yep.
tell you to do, but also with your own flavor too. I'm a big believer in that. I'm a flavorful, kind of gal. But you got to then make sure, especially as an emerging franchisor, you got to make sure that playbook's there. You got to make sure your support team's there and your business coaches are there. And, have your business coaches actually lived the business? Have they gone out there and done the things that they're telling and teaching franchisees to do? Do they have firsthand experience, or did you just hire them a couple weeks ago and now they're telling these franchisees what to do, right? So I think that piece is something, and we've now at Fastlane, we are continuously and constantly developing these different ways to make sure that we're forthright and transparent with franchise brands on
Got you.
how important that is, because we know what we're capable of from a development perspective. But nobody wins if a franchisee invests or a candidate invests and that infrastructure and support isn't.
What's going on, everybody? I hope you're liking the conversation this far. Please take a moment, give it a 5-star review. It really helps spread this out to as many people as possible. All right, let's get back to the episode. What a great answer. Thank you so much. That was very thorough. Let's take a minute and break down, because what I understand about Franchise Fastlane, every VP has a team, and the team is composed of a certain number of brands. So would you mind giving me a shout out of the brands that you have on your team, and we can kind of talk about that for a little bit?
Yeah, thank you for asking. Just really quick, a little backstory and history on me. When I first came into Fastlane, I came in for a short period of time as a director, and I launched a brand as a director. And you know it, Matt, because you and I talked about this brand. So it's called
Yes, we did.
Soccer Stars. Has a very special place in my heart. It was a difficult decision for me to leave. I was the CDO at the brand that I was with for all those years before, and it was a tough decision to leave and transition away from that brand. So, but Soccer Stars and youth enrichment and the team and just so many other elements, of course, Fastlane caused me to end up making that leap that a lot of these people make when they invest in a franchise brand. So I did. And then after about, I guess, 6 months or so, 7 months, I moved into the VP role. So I hired somebody internally at Soccer Stars to come in and develop Soccer Stars as the director. His name's Wes Graves, Wessie G, we call him.
Shout out.
Yeah. You know Wessie G. So
Yeah,
I got Soccer
my guy.
Stars. I have the Talks, which is a brand that we launched late last year that is off to a really strong start from a development perspective. Just, again, I don't like the word different or unique, but in my mind, really a different brand and unique brand in many ways, and kind of like a franchise concept, in my opinion, of the next and new generation, which I think is really, really cool. So I've got the Talks. I've got the Exercise Coach, which is a really cool fitness brand focused particularly on people who are age 45, 50 and older. They've been in the Fastlane portfolio for a long time. I inherited them really almost since Fastlane itself started. So they've got 200 plus open locations across the US, and they're international as well. And then I have Zoom Drain. So I'm kind of covering all the bases. We got like kids, the Talks is a luxury brand, Exercise Coach. Zoom Drain is just like it sounds. It's a dirty, gritty home services brand that I also love, based out of Philly. I inherited that brand as well. We have had a really good run in the Fastlane so far, and I think we're going to have another really great year next year with that one. And then last but not least, my newest brand that we just launched a couple months ago now, called Wax Pot. And it is exactly as it sounds. It's a brick and mortar waxing brand. I don't know if you found this, Matt, but there does seem to be all of a sudden this like emergence of waxing brands that's happening right now in our world. And I think one of the reasons is because there's just a need, there's an obvious recurrence opportunity, and the unit economics for these waxing studios are just incredibly strong. So that's my most recent launch. So 5 brands total.
Awesome. So Soccer Stars, The Tox, Exercise Coach, Zoom Drain, and then Wax Pot. Yeah, you do cover all the different areas. We got child enrichment. We got a couple beauty, wellness. So The Tox, I'd put that in wellness, Wax Pot, beauty, Zoom Drain, home services, and then Exercise Coach, fitness. I mean, you're covering the whole gamut there. That's really cool. I agree. I have seen more, especially in the beauty space, kind of come up after COVID. Home services really spiked, and fitness kind of struggled. But as things have kind of churned and we're in kind of a new economy right now, I have seen the beauty and the wellness space really pick up, especially as people are really focused on their livelihood and their well-being. And it makes a lot of sense. When you guys are adding brands, I know that it gets to a point where brands can kind of level up and might not need your service anymore. But there's also a vetting process once brands are in, where you might learn something about the brand and they might fall out. How do you guys, is that like your role? Is that a part of what you do? How do you evaluate when it's time to graduate a brand or move a brand out and it may not meet the standard of the Fastlane anymore?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we have a program now that is essentially functions as almost like a grading system for the brands that are in our portfolio. And so again, I reference the necessities and niceties when it comes to brand recruitment. This is a brand health tracker so that we make sure that we internally are aligned with our brands and partners on, what their development goals are, how we're helping them achieve and or succeed them. And then equally as important, if we're either meeting those targets or exceeding those targets, to your point, how are they functioning on the other end as these franchisees are coming into the system? So yes, that grading, me as a VP or EVP, and then we have a whole team internally here because we've got a huge now here at Fastlane operational department too. They're wonderful. And so they're also involved in tracking those things so that we can make sure that the partnerships still do make sense for everybody involved. And then the other thing that we do that I thought was a great idea, it wasn't mine, it was a great idea, my opinion though. And so it's called a mastermind program. And so our director of training and education here at Fastlane, she hosts on a weekly basis these mastermind calls with all of our franchisors that are a part of our portfolio so that they can discuss together how things are going, both from a development perspective, but certainly from again, post-development perspective. What could they be doing better? What's not working? What technology systems are they using? And so on and so forth. And we've received a lot of really positive feedback about that program. I know for me directly from the brands that I'm responsible for, they seem to really appreciate that opportunity to meet with these other brands that are living in many ways a lot of the same things that they are.
Oh, that's really cool. And it's super important that exists. And it's a cool aspect to being in a bigger system. I mean, franchising in general, if I invest in a franchise, I'm buying into a bigger system, but it's really cool to see that being taking place at a higher level as a franchisor. They're coming into your system and they're being able to learn and grow from other franchisors that are also in that same ecosystem. I think that's really neat. You tried to jump the gun on me a little bit by talking about your upbringing in the space. So I want to actually come back to that because you said something that was really interesting to me and is close to my heart, or maybe I just feel it right now. And it's the transition from one space to another and how that was difficult for you. Maybe can we dive into that a little bit and talk about like what exactly was going on at the time, what made it difficult? And then
Yeah.
how did you overcome that in, maybe placing your identity in one thing versus the other? And I'll just leave it at that. And I'm just interested to hear what you have to say.
Yeah. Thank you for asking. So, I mean, you go to these different events that we all go to, right? People who are a part of this franchising world. And you hear from a lot of people, particularly people working in franchise development, if you ask them, how'd you end up doing this, right? Like, how did you get involved in franchising? The most common answer typically that you get is, I fell into franchising. It's
Yeah.
not like, there are some people like TJ, he's a VP here at Fastlane, and franchising was a part of his family, right? And his
Sure.
upbringing. But that's not near as common, and it wasn't the case for me either. So my husband and I met in the city in Toronto, here in Ontario. My parents are from small town Ontario, a little tiny town called Goderich. It's beautiful, but it's pretty far from the city. So we met, and I always knew that I wanted to move out towards where my parents are. I'm very family oriented. And so my husband, Jordan, decided that he liked me enough to make that move with me. And so we
Good
made
for
the
him.
move. I think it was a good decision. I
Yeah,
think,
good
I
for him.
hope.
Yeah, yeah.
So when we did that, it was like the options. And I went to, I had my education and went to university, and there weren't a lot of options. And so I just applied for this expense analyst role, which, me, Matt, you don't meet me and think, wow, this girl seems like an expense analyst. I don't give that. So, but I applied because I was just like throwing stuff at the wall and just hoping something would stick, young in my early 20s. And so it turns out that job was with this franchise brand called Schoolie Mitchell that's based in this small city of about 30,000 people, about 15 minutes from where I still live here in Ontario. And so I met with the founder. His name is Dennis Schoolie. He's very well known in the franchising world. And he didn't give me the job for the expense analyst. And again, they were small. So he was doing interviews, and he was just like, look, there's no way you would enjoy being an expense analyst. And that this brand is a cost reduction contingency B2B consulting brand. And so
Sure.
didn't get the job, carried on, ended up getting another job in HR recruitment for a little bit. And then Schoolie Mitchell was starting to grow a bit, slowly but growing. And so there was a franchisee success coach opportunity. So somebody who would teach new franchisees, systems and so on and so forth. And so we re-engaged at that point, and that's how my career in franchising started, as I came in.
Nice.
Yeah. And so flash forward, I worked in operations and training for about 3-4 years, was eventually the director of ops. And then I moved into development. And myself and Dennis Schoolie, the two of us, we did all of the conferences together. We developed together. We had a lot of success. I would call him a mentor to me in many ways over the course of those years. But when you're in this world, not but just when you're in this world, you learn in time power of the community that we exist in. It's such a beautiful thing. You hear it all the time, how special the people are. I'm biased, but that are a part of this world. And so a guy named Bobby Brennan, who a lot of people also know
The
in
notorious Bobby Brennan.
Brennan.
Yeah.
He had contacted me, and him and I were in touch for about 3 years about me coming into the Fastlane. He was a vice president, like I am now, with Franchise Fastlane. And so to answer your question directly, because I know this is a long-winded answer,
Perfect.
my husband and I always knew we wanted to be parents. We weren't blessed with an easy journey in conceiving a child, but we did eventually get there. We have a little boy who's going to be 3. His name is Bo. And so I gave birth to our son, Bo. And up here in Canada, we're blessed with long maternity leave. So they're at least 12 months, in some cases 18 months. Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's a long, long time. It's I think, such a blessing to have that time. So
wow.
Yeah. So while I was on maternity leave with Bo, I just had more time to really think and consider what I wanted to do next in my career in franchising. Bobby had engaged with me, like I said, 3 years prior to that. So I had always, and he does such a good job. He's very persistent in just having meaningful and intentional touch points with the people that he's interacting with. In my opinion, he's one of the best at that. And so I watched Fastlane. I watched him and his trajectory. I watched Carrie Gilly, who I know I'm one of many who are very inspired by her and her trajectory in our world. And so I decided about 6-ish months into my maternity leave to re-engage with Bobby. And he and I started to talk again, and fast forward after a lot of conversations and thought and honestly heartache, because Dennis and his wife Beth and Schoolie Mitchell, they really were like family to me. I don't always love when people say that because it sounds performative, but they were. We did this whole thing in small town Ontario together through the pandemic. And,
Wow.
I'm so grateful for all of the experience that I gained there. But I just like these people who invest in franchises, I just felt it was time. Like I needed to just take the leap. And I saw this really incredible speaker last week, and she talked about how so often we as people, we think about what's the worst thing that could happen if we do something, but we forget to think about what's the best thing that can happen if we do decide to do whatever this thing is that's a big change or scary. And I was able to get myself, this was long before I heard the speaker, but to the place of like, what is the best that could happen now if I decide to do this and come into Fastlane? And so I took the leap. And it was tough. And it was tough, I know, on Dennis. But I look back now and reflect, and man, am I ever grateful that I made the decision to take the leap and come to
Yo, thanks for listening this far. It's at this point in the episode that I want to talk about Streetwise franchising, teaching, training, building. Streetwise franchising. As a franchise consultant, it's my job, it's my absolute pleasure, and it's my mission to help aspiring entrepreneurs find, launch, and build their ideal business. I've been a franchise owner for almost a decade. I know what it means to struggle. I know what it means to build a team. If you're ready to get off of zero, if you're ready to build something for yourself, visit streetwisefranchising.com. Let's get the conversation started. Don't wait until tomorrow to build your future. It starts today. Streetwise franchising. Stay humble, stay hungry, stay streetwise. Let's get back to the episode. Wow, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I will shout out Michelle Poehler. Did I say that right?
Yeah, Michelle.
Yeah,
Poehler.
so I'm listening to the book Hello Fears.
Oh, you are? I have it
right
sitting
now.
right next to me here in my office.
Wow. Yeah, no, it's actually really good, and it's very challenging just personally to I find myself very okay with risk. And a few years ago, I think it started when I was a kid, honestly, but I've always gone headfirst into fear, for better and for worse. And I've put myself in situations that have been character building situations. And so, yeah, the book actually
is describing it.
Yeah, for sure. The book actually, though, is really good in helping me kind of rethink where I am in my life and what I want to build for my family. And I love that concept. What is the best thing that could happen? So that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
What do you want to build with your family?
Oh gosh, come on now. This is my show. You're not supposed to ask me questions.
One. You know I'm a question asker.
No, it's all good. I actually like it. I like it when people throw the questions back at me. It's cool. So appreciate that. I think at this point in the stage of my development, right, I have my businesses as a franchisee that are building. I mean, we've got the team, we've got growth, and that's really exciting. And I've been able to pull myself out of the business, and I love that. That's what it was all about from the beginning, to create these semi-passive, semi-involved opportunities, semi-absentee opportunities. It just took years and years to do it, right? And so now we are here.
You should be so proud of that. Not to interrupt, but that is not easy. And a lot of people, I think, don't realize how much grit it takes. So you should be really proud of yourself.
Well, I appreciate that. There were many nights where up at 2 a.m., like, man, how am I going to solve this problem today? And what am I doing here? How are we going to get through this in this season? And they were not all bad things, but sometimes, your mind never shuts off. And that's also a thing that a lot of people don't consider in business ownership, is when you're when you're clocking in, clocking out, you got a consistent paycheck as a W-2 for the most part. You can turn it off, but
Yeah.
as a business owner, it doesn't always work like that. And not to say that having a job is not stressful, because I know that it is. You still got to meet the quotas. You still got a family you got to support and provide for. So to not discredit that in any way, just it's a fact. As a business owner, it doesn't ever shut off. And so,
100%.
yeah,
It's like
yes,
in my opinion, it is like a baby in a way,
yes, for
right? It's
sure.
not a
In a way.
human. If you're going to invest in a business, you should feel, at least to a certain extent, like it's a baby of yours. And if you have kids and you've had a baby, there's a lot of love and blood and sweat and tears and care, that you pour into that, right?
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that. Now that we're there, and I launched as a franchise consultant, which you're very familiar with Franchise, just about a year ago. And
Congrats.
as I'm building this part of my business, I love getting to do it. It is difficult though when you're growing, because again, I'm starting over in a sense, and a lot of what I have to do is I educate people. I provide a lot of free value up
Yeah.
front. And I'm kind of withholding to other people making decisions for their life before I get anything on the back end. And so I'm in a pretty interesting stage in my personal development. And I'm interested to see where it goes. But I currently love getting to engage with people, to provide education, to build this platform, to help and be a giver and add value. But truly, to answer your question, I want to build something that I can provide for my family. And I've never been shy of working hard, but I want to be able to work on my terms. And does that mean that I'm not willing to grind and work 50, 60, 70-hour weeks? No, but I want to be able to build something that I truly believe in, that has sustained growth past what I can give to it. So something that will last beyond me. And in the process, I want to be able to teach my kids about that process. Because I think for me growing up, I didn't grow up in an entrepreneurial home. And
Yeah.
the whole idea of business ownership, I mean, my dad and I came into this at the same time. I was 25 and he was 54. And so we came into this life together, and it's a beautiful thing because now I have an opportunity to teach all of my kids
Yeah.
what's possible that's outside of the quote unquote norm.
Yeah.
And I think just figuring out how to tap into that
Yeah.
is the big thing that I'm remaining open
Yeah.
and still trying to figure out. But it's definitely been a journey, and
I think it's so cool um that you're exploring what that really looks like and will look like and can look like for you, because you do have young, right? Like, and you started this at such a young age, like you said. And I mean, like, even in this is really starting to change. But I remember when I started, I'm 34 now. I started in my early 20s in franchising. And they're just a lot of the people that were looking to invest in franchise brands at the time, at least in my experience, they were 50 or older for the most part. And that's really
yep,
started to change. And I just think there is, and this is one of the reasons that I'm glad I took the leap that I did. There is a lot of beauty and a lot that can come from that exploration in this space, whatever that may look like. And one thing that I've always loved about you is everything that to me anyways, that you do, you're just always paying attention. You're attentive and looking to learn and looking to fuel whatever you do next off of the people that you interact with and the information that you pick up. Like, to me, I see you as like this beautiful sponge in a lot of ways as you've kind of evolved since I met you, and that can only lead to great things. And I feel like it's got to be really inspiring for your kids too, especially as they grow older.
well, I truly appreciate that. And that's the big concept of this show, is being a sponge and doing whatever it takes to get into the room. And then once you're in the room, now what are you going to do? Are you going to absorb? Are you going to learn? Are you going to squander the opportunity, or really take it as an opportunity to level up and either gain influence in the room, get to the next room, or now really bring more people into this room to level up in the way that you did. Now you brought it up. I was going to figure out how I was going to bring this up, but this is your fault now. The first time you and I connected, I was on a roof installing Christmas lights,
Yeah.
and I had no idea. I had a small idea on what I wanted to do next in the franchising space. And so, gosh, a year and a half, almost 2 years later, the fact that I've been able to be in some of the rooms, which you've been in, most of them, but just being in the rooms that I have, it truly is a special thing. And it is a true testament on what's possible in leveling up if you do pay attention and if you do reach out and put yourself out there. And like you said, it truly is a beautiful thing when you lean in that way. So I appreciate you for that, because you were one of the very first people that spoke into me in the franchising space. So thank you.
Of course, you don't have. Look, if you didn't end up on my team here in the Fastlane, I love that you ended up doing what you're doing with Choice, and I think the world of them. And I'll always remember that conversation, not just because you were on a roof, but just because of you, and your light. And I think that's also a special, I see it all the time. And I always remember it when there's just these people who we meet, whether it's somebody who's looking to invest or in our world who just have that like light right inside, and you can see it and it's so meaningful, and you have that. So I'll always remember that conversation.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. And that's actually the challenge that I put towards the people that I engage with, because just speaking about myself, I don't know that I will be in the same seat that I'm in today. I don't know that I'll still be in that seat next year. I do know that today I have an opportunity to add value, and I'm going to plug in and add as much value as I can and learn as much as I can, because as I take steps and as I progress and I aim to get 1% better, who knows what is going to be in front of me, but I do know that there will be growth at the end of it, and I am not stuck. And if I know that about myself, I know that whatever candidate I'm talking to, anybody that's trying to leave their job, trying to make some sort of a change, if you're listening, you are not stuck. If you just take the step, if you look to learn and look to give value, who knows where you'll be in 18 months. It doesn't matter, but opportunity is out there.
You can do the scary things.
Yeah,
And I
facts.
think to your point on learning, when I look at Dennis Schooley and then I look at Carrie Gilly, for example, co-founder of Franchise Fastlane, even Ryan Zink, these people are all deep believers in lifelong learning. It was a huge integral part of the training at Schooley Mitchell that we did here at Franchise Fastlane. Our leadership team, we are always together as one group reading a book and then discussing said book. And I just think that is such an important trait, and I know you have that too.
Yeah, every person that comes on my team, it's not about if, it's about when you leave my team, because I know that growth is coming. I want you to be in a better spot than you were when you came. No matter
Yeah.
what, off top, I want you in a better spot. So my job as the owner is to develop you and steward
Yeah.
the opportunity that I have in this season of your life in
Yeah.
order to at least play a small part in getting you there.
I'm such a deep believer in when I bring somebody into my team here at Fastlane, we do a weekly team meeting. And if there's a new person, a new director on a brand on the team, have everybody introduce themselves. And then I'll always ask each person share a piece of advice that they've been given over the course of their life that just stuck with them, and was really meaningful to them. And I'm always so amazed at what I hear and what you hear from people in general when you ask them that question, because it can be very telling in a lot of different ways and also inspiring. For me, when people ask me that question, and I think this is so important for everything that you're doing and we're doing, and for people who are investing in franchises and taking that leap, I say to my whole team all the time, nobody is you, and that is your superpower.
Mm.
And I think that that is so important, because there's always going to be things to learn. There's always going to be fears. Like you were saying, but man, if you can stay authentic to who you are, and that's one of the things professionally I'm most proud of. And I think it's okay that we say we're proud of things. You ask people who worked with me 10 years ago versus now I am me. I show up as me. And if somebody doesn't like it, it's okay, but I am me and this is who I am. And I'm going to do this thing in life, personally and professionally, as me. And unfortunately, a lot of people just aren't quite so comfortable with that, and yet it's just to me, it's like, and I've seen it in my team here at Fastlane. I see a Gabby on the talks and how she's recognizing that and how she's evolving into this star or grace and it is the coolest thing to see that
Oh,
happen, because embracing who we are, to me, I mean, it's at the crux of what joy and fulfillment in life is all about. It's okay to be who you are.
I love that. That's awesome. And I'm glad you said it, because if you would have brought up that point and not said yours, I would have called you out for it. So thank you. Thank you for sharing. And it reminds me, so there's a book, The Greatest Salesman in the World, and it
Yeah.
has like all the 10 scrolls. And I think it might be scroll 4, but it talks about how you are the greatest gift that the world has. Your uniqueness is the most special. It's the most miraculous thing that could exist, because there's only one you. And I resonate with that a lot, and I love that. And I've
Even
had to.
Dr. Seuss, he says it. Nobody is youer than you in one
Oh,
of
I
his,
love that.
you
There
know.
we go. Big Dr. Seuss fan over at the McReynolds house. So I
Just the
appreciate
little
that.
ones, you and
Yeah.
young kids.
Yeah. Yeah. Gosh, I'm trying to think about mine now. I've had such solid leadership in my life. And the first thing that comes to my head is my college football coach, Mike Swider from Wheaton College, would always say, "You're never as good as you think you are, and you're
Yeah.
never as bad as you think you are. And it's really on you to just own where you are in this moment and seek to do your best with what you have, because it's inevitable. You're going to make a big play and you're going to get high on yourself, but you're never as good as you think you are. And then you're going to mess up and you're going to miss a tackle or drop a ball in the end zone, and you're going to feel real low, but you're never as bad as you think you are. It's about the work that you put in every single rep." So that's what
So
I got
true.
off the cuff.
To tie that quickly into franchising, and this
Yeah.
may be an unpopular opinion, but one of the
Uh-oh.
things that I believe is really important for franchisors, especially emerging franchise brands, but even in general, is when you're a franchisor as a founder, and I've seen this time and time again, this brand, I mean, it's your baby, right? It really is. You've created this. What I always advise, and sometimes I get looks back when I say this, is when you're evaluating a potential franchise partner and you have your checklist of all these things that you're looking for, we hear them all the time. You got to be able to sell and you got to get out in your community. You got to be able to talk to people, like all those things that we always hear, which are great and they're true. But I think it's so important for franchisors to be able to put their ego aside just a
Mm.
little bit, put your ego aside a bit and ask yourself, not only is this somebody who has all of these things and I think can execute the playbook, but is this somebody who I think could make this system, this community, even better than what it already is?
Wow.
And so it's tough to do that because, and there are some who will never buy into that, right? It's like, this is my baby. I've created it. People just need to follow the playbook. But if you really ask yourself that question, I think that's one of the best things that you can do as a franchisor. And I think amazing things will come from that for your franchise community and for.
Wow, that's huge. And I appreciate somebody like yourself in your seat. And I know you and I know you have integrity, but literally somebody who's sitting in your seat saying that is so powerful, because we try to keep it to, we're not necessarily selling franchises, we're awarding franchises from the perspective of the franchisor. But it does get into that, and it gets so heartbroken when I see franchisees in a system that they should not be in for whatever reason. Maybe they didn't really have enough capital. Maybe they don't fit the ideal model. Maybe they just don't fit the culture, but the franchisor was so fast in putting somebody in a seat that they didn't really evaluate the person. And I love that. Are you, as a franchisee, going to make this system better,
Yeah.
or are you not?
Yeah.
And it could be as simple as that. So
Yeah.
that's really cool.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
I completely agree with you. It is in my opinion anyways, and you're right, there is this, especially now, I mean, I'll address the kind of elephant in the room with this, with FSOs in today's environment in the franchising space, there is this whole like, are they just selling, right? And this whole responsible franchising and, that whole thing that's become quite prominent, especially this past year. But it's like nobody wins. To go back to what you said, when somebody is sold on and placed in a system that just isn't right. It's a lose-lose situation for all parties involved. And it's so important to me, no matter what, there's going to be times where you think somebody's the right fit and it doesn't work out, or there's a capital or issue, like you said, or something. But just like from an ethical perspective, for me, these are people's lives. These people have family, like it is just so important to do everything we can, developer and franchisor and consultant alike, to make sure that it's right.
Yeah, and you brought up the whole responsible franchising thing kind of picked up and turned into like this cliche thing now, and it goes both ways. It's not just on the sales side, it's also on the franchisee side. So we've already spoken towards the franchisor and what that looks like, but maybe coach me up and coach the listener up on some mindset to be responsible when you're actually looking at investing in a franchise. What should you be thinking about? It's one thing to overcome fears, but it's another thing to, make a wise financial decision. And granted, there can be paralysis by analysis, and so you can look at numbers all day and never get off of the never get off a home base, never do anything, right? And so that's something that it's my job and part of your job to coach people through, but we still want to make sure that they're doing it the right way. So how would you on this platform maybe coach somebody up in how they're thinking about that?
I think there's two things at least that come to mind immediately when you ask that question. I think there are a lot of people that do get very caught up in the financial element of evaluating franchises. So, meaning
Sure.
looking at the unit economics, what do the margins look like? What's the revenue potential? How quickly can I grow and scale? All of those things. And I don't want to take away from the importance of those things. I think they're important. But I think you're looking at like you really got to ask yourself, because the vast majority of franchise agreements are 10 years, right? A 10-year franchise agreement that you're signing. I tell people, think of that in many ways like a 10-year marriage, right? That you've just committed to with that franchisor. So number one, like, are you really thinking about and do you understand what the day-to-day living this business, whatever brand it is going to be like for you and for your team and for the people that are going to be involved? Because it sounds crazy, but I think sometimes people just don't invest enough thought into that because they're caught up on the
100%.
numbers and other things. And so then they're tripping because they're living it after they sign and they fund. And it's like, oh man, this is insert whatever the brand is. So I think that is really important, even if it's a brand that is truly more of a passive or semi-absentee type brand, which is a whole other can of worms. You still got to ask yourself that question because it's 10 years. So I think that's one. And then number two, who are you partnering with? Like, think about when you get married, right? Like, who are you partnering with? Do you like them? Do you trust them? Have you had exposure to the people that, like I was when I first started, on the front lines teaching these systems? Like, how do you feel about them? Because man, you're going to be leaning on them big time in those early stages. And again, don't think people always think or evaluate that piece or part enough. And so those are the two things that come to mind that I think, like, if there is that synergy that needs to be there between the franchisor and their team and the franchisee, and if that franchise partner really does understand the execution of that day-to-day, good, bad, and everywhere in between, I think in the vast majority of cases, that's going to lead to a successful relationship.
That's huge. I mean, you hit on all three of those really. I mean, the two that you said, but even the first part in getting caught up in the finances and what the opportunity is from a financial perspective, that piece, but then the two that you added on top of that, there were adding my second business, things that relate to both of those, that in the role and the team itself that I thought about, but I ignored because I was so set on what I was going to do in this season of my life. And I was overconfident in my abilities as a franchisee that I ignored things that might have made an easier transition into this next chapter of what I'm truly trying to build for
Yeah.
myself and for my family that I bypassed. And now, because of that experience, I know exactly what you're talking about, and I see it, and I see so many other people falling into the same thing. And there's just such a delicate balance. And that's why it's so important, if you are looking at franchises, to really partner with, again, people that you can trust.
Yeah.
And if there are red flags or yellow flags, at least slow down to make sure you're moving in peace. Would that be a fair
Absolutely.
breakdown?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
and because there are candidates who just like, even let's say they've been doing just tons of due diligence, and that's okay. Although, like you said, you can only analyze and evaluate so much. At some
Right.
point, you got to decide, one way or
Right.
the other, what you want to do. So I think for those people that are in that latter stages of the process, if they're still questioning a bunch of things or like picking at little things, I challenge them at the phase, because I meet candidates when they get to the last part of the process, like they've committed to a confirmation day. I ask them, like, are you sure that you really want to do this? Because if you still are feeling and thinking all of these things, it doesn't feel like you necessarily trust these people that you're about to commit to a 10-year partnership with. And I don't want you to do it if you don't trust,
Yeah.
and it's hard, right? Because people are risk averse and, never want to feel like they're being sold. And I get it. It's a big decision, but like, man, you got to get as close as you can with that particular piece, I think, because it's like a marriage.
Yeah, no, that's really a great way to think about it. I don't think there's anything else I can add. I like that. I like that a lot. How would you define this chapter in your life, in your personal growth, as you've kind of overcome this big pivot? You're a mom and you're still working and you've experienced success and you've grown and elevated in your space and you lead people now. How would you define this chapter, and what is it that you're looking to build moving forward?
Good question. I would define this chapter for me personally and professionally. I think because I'm very much I said this earlier, for me, those two things are very intertwined. I'm not like, this is my professional thing and this is my personal thing. Like I was like dancing in the closet with my son this morning
Mm.
and sharing that while I was also doing a launch call for Wax Pop. So the two things are very intertwined.
Yeah.
These past 2 years have been a combination of, I think, the most challenging in some way for me, both personally and professionally, but also the most beautiful and rewarding at the same time. And I think you hear that from people all the time. Coming into Fastlane, the transition into the VP role, launching these brands, and everything, team building, all of that stuff, the travel. Everybody knows this who knows me. I struggle with the travel because I'm a mom and I love home and I love my family, yet it's an important part of what we do. So that's been tough. But then it's like, we were able to buy our dream home. Our little boy is growing up like good, in so many other ways. So it's been like, I know, and I often say, I'm going to look back at some point when hopefully my husband and I are much older and things have slowed down, and Bo, our son, is older. And I'm going to, in some ways, I think, just like miss the beautiful chaos that I am existing in right now. And so that's how I look at it. And I try to just take each day as they come and just remind myself in the morning of all the things that I have to be grateful for. My husband had testicular cancer earlier this year. I think I told you that. Luckily, it was, detected early and he's now okay and he didn't have to have treatment, at least as of now. And so it's just like all of that's happening amidst all of those other things that I just talked about. And it just reminds you, like, man, are we lucky just to wake up and be here and get to do this podcast and do the things that we do. And so I have a lot of gratitude for that and for these past couple of years.
Yeah, praise God. Praise
Praise God.
God. What did you have to work through in some of those challenging transitions? Like, where did you truly have to plug in and maybe seek some mentorship or seek some outside resources? Was there anything there And, when you left Schoolie Mitchell to the Fastlane, I mean, 6, 7 months, that's a pretty big level up. Like what did you have to do in order to prepare yourself to match the growth that you were seeing?
I would say at least one of the biggest challenges or transitions was I had never experienced, because I was with an individual independent brand for my whole career, I'd never experienced the FSO approach to, okay, you're partnering with a brand, then you're helping them prepare to launch said brand into all of these different consultant networks. Like I had never been through that before. And so I was doing that at the same time as I was inheriting pre-existing brands that already existed in the fast lane and the
Mm.
people affiliated with those. Plus, I needed to replace myself on Soccer Stars. I needed to find, so like it was so much going on and happening. And I think I'm a pretty good multitasker, but like at times I just was totally overwhelmed. Right? Like, how do I, and I'm the type of person, and I feel like you are too, Matt. Like I give all I can. I'm just a giver. Like I'm a feeler and I'm a giver, and I'm trying to show up in all these different places. And I'll tell you, at age 34, I had my first like white hair pop out of the top of my head because I'm like trying to give to all these things. So I did really have to spend time figuring out how to manage those things while also still making sure that I'm doing what I want to do to show up in my personal life and that I'm looking after me, myself. Because if we don't do that, in my opinion, we can't show up in the way we want to in all of those other areas.
Facts. I think it's really important as somebody is transitioning or they're going through a growth spurt in their professional or personal journey to, hey, we got to assess and understand who we are, but we also need those clarity breaks, those opportunities to really take a step back and evaluate what this path means and what it's also doing to my physical body, my spiritual self, in order to process through those things. And I think it's really healthy. And I think the fact that you said that, I know somebody's listening to it and they might engage with you online, but they never would have guessed it. But hearing you say it here helped them feel more comfortable that their stuff is okay. And for them to be able to take a step and to take a breath and to process and to just be patient with the growth. And so I appreciate you for adding value to that person and definitely to me, because I always appreciate that.
I think it's okay to be vulnerable. I'm a
Yeah.
big believer in that. I know there are some that aren't as comfortable with that, but nobody has it all together all the time. And they just, and now we live in this world too, of course, with social media, where for a lot of people it looks like it, right? Like the closet video was cute this morning with my son and I, but like we all have stuff, we all have challenges, and in my opinion, it's okay to say and share that both professionally and personally.
Facts. Well, I appreciate that. And the main audience to this podcast is people that are looking to make a transition, looking to level up, maybe make a change, invest in a franchise. But again, like you just said, it doesn't matter where you're at. We all go through the same things. And I believe that our pain points lead us to our purpose, but they also help us to understand and engage with one another to create a beautiful collective where we can all grow. What would you say to somebody that is maybe looking to make a shift, make a change, whether that's invest in a franchise or do something different with their lives? What encouragement would you give that person based on your experience in helping them to take that first step?
So, a couple things. One comes from my mama. Her name's Lisa. You got to make sure that, at least to the extent that you're capable of doing, you got to figure out how to love yourself, in my opinion. That's number one. You got to love yourself first, figure out what that looks like. Goes back to no one is you. That is your superpower, the authenticity piece. And then I think the second part is, ever scares you but really excites you at the same time, like you get that feeling in your stomach of like, this is so scary and no, I'd probably never do it, but like, I love this thing, I love it, whatever that is. Have the courage, and particularly in this world that we exist in and people looking at these franchise opportunities, have the courage to explore it to the fullest. And no, at least in my opinion, and I share this with a lot of the people that I meet with who are almost about to invest in a franchise, usually, in my opinion, you're never going to be 100% certain when you're about to make that investment. You'll never get to 100%. I tell people, I think it's odd if somebody says, I'm 100% sure, I'm 100% there, like, let's go, let me send you the franchise, all that. I think that's odd. You are going to get to the point where you're 93, 94, depends how risk averse I think you are, how you're wired as a person.
Sure.
Then what you do is you take that lingering 5 or 6% and you channel that into giving those next steps every single thing that you've got. And if you love yourself and you do that and you have that excitement mixed with the fear that I talked about, to me, that should create magic in your life for you or your family or your loved ones. Or
Beautiful. Jessica McLean, ladies and gentlemen.
Listen
Thank
to
you
that,
so
you
much.
nailed it. The
Yeah, well, I got it now. I got it locked in now. I'll never forget it. I'll never forget it. Thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you.
on. I finally got you on. I mean, it just took me a year to finally get you. You're a busy gal. You're very powerful.
Listen, it's my pleasure. I think the world of you, and I could talk to you for hours. So I appreciate you having me. Thank you.
Likewise. Yeah, I could have kept this going. There are some things that I wrote down in my notes that maybe we'll just have you come on again. If you ever wanted to co-host an episode, maybe we turn it around. We turn it around, we flip the script a little bit, or we bring somebody on. This stage, I told you, I got my hands up, my palms facing the air right now. That's how I walk through life. So anything you got, I'm open for it. You were a great guest.
Thank you.
So thanks for coming on. To the listener, you already know there's a ton of value here. Feel free to reach out to Jessica if you want to. She's on all the social platforms. If you're interested in any of the brands, holler at me and I can connect you to the team. Until next time, stay humble, stay hungry, stay streetwise. Peace. All right, everybody, that's a wrap. Thank you so much for making it to the end. Hey, if this episode added any value to your life at all, please like it, share it, give me a 5-star review. It's the only way that this show is going to gain traction and help more people achieve their dreams. If you're ready to start your franchise journey, visit streetwisefranchising.com. Let's set up a time to talk. Hit me up on LinkedIn. Until next time, stay humble, stay hungry, stay streetwise. Peace.